Hi everyone, Michael with Bad Goblin Games here, and this video is an overview of how the turn sequence and order system works in Ages of Conflict. Now, Ages of Conflict is an orders-based system. This means every unit in the game receives an order that determines what actions the unit can take when activated. Orders are assigned to units with tokens, and the tokens are issued face down to conceal them from your opponent. Let's review all the orders that we have. The first order we're going to review is the change formation order. This is the order that you would use if you want your or a unit to change its formation. So for example, if we have a unit that's in a column formation and we want it to adopt a line formation, then this is the order it would be given. Now, the important thing to understand with this order is that units with change formation cannot move and they cannot attack with missile weapons. If they're engaged in hand combat, then they can attack in hand, but they cannot, uh, you know, engage them. Like they can't initiate hand combat. They can't cast missile weapons. They're spending their entire turn basically just trying to get reordered. The next order is the charge order. So the charge order allows a unit to move at its charge pace. So for most units, like most infantry units, this is going to be 15 centimeters. So with the charge order, uh, what you're really trying to represent is a unit moving as quickly as possible. They want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And this is an order that you often use to engage in hand combat. Now, the important thing to remember with the charge orders is that the unit is really spending almost its entire turn really just moving. So it doesn't have time to cast missile weapons. So you can't issue a unit charge orders and use your bows or use slings or anything like that. All they can do is move. And if they do engage in hand combat, then they are allowed to attack in hand combat. The benefit of attacking, the benefit of charging into hand combat with the charge order is that there's a possibility that if you charge a smaller unit, it will simply flee in uh, it'll flee the field in face of that charge. Our example here is we have our Persians. They're going to charge this smaller unit of Spartans. So they charge up. The Spartans at that point are obligated to make a command check to see if they can just stand their ground. If the Spartans fail that check, then they flee the field. Our next order is the first missiles order. So the first missiles orders, this allows units with missile weapons such as bows and slings to cast their missiles before anyone else is permitted to attack. A unit with first missiles is not permitted to move. The only thing that unit can do that turn is cast their missiles. So we'll cover this a bit more as I go over the turn sequence. The next order we'll cover is the march order. So the march order permits units to move and attack, including with missile weapons. Though units that attack with missile weapons on march orders, they cast their missiles after those with first missiles. So again, we'll cover that a bit more in the turn sequence. Though this is the order you would want to give if you want a unit to move at its ordinary or quick pace. The last order you could issue a unit is second missiles. So second missiles is this is the order you would use if you want this unit to cast missiles that are just slower, just slow shooting or firing missiles. So this would be something like a musket, heavy crossbows, cannons, basically missiles that just or missile weapons or ranged weapons that just take a while to get ready, take a long time to load, that sort of thing. Now that we've looked at the orders, it's time to look at how the orders integrate with the turn sequence. The orders determine what a unit can do on a turn, though the turn sequence tells us when the unit can carry out that order. Now, before continuing, I want to point out that Ages of Conflict is an alternating action system. This means that players alternate activating units. So rather than a player moving all of their units while the other player watches, the players instead take turns. So player A will activate a unit, then player B, then A, B, and back and forth until all units have been activated. Now, every turn is broken down into a few different phases, and that's what we're going to review now. So the first phase is the issue orders phase. So this is where the turn begins. In this phase, every player will issue an order to all of their units. And there's no need to alternate actions here. Every unit's getting an order issued face down. No need to go back and forth. Just all players just issue orders until all units have received an order. Next is the initiative phase. Now this phase determines what player acts first. So you issue orders and then you determine if you're going first or second. The next phase is the movement and reveal phase. Now, two things happen in this phase. The first is players take turns activating units. To activate a unit, you flip over that unit's orders. If the order permits movement, then the unit is now moved. So what this means is if you flip over an order and that order is march or charge, then you move the unit now. If it's change formation, then you go ahead and attempt your formation change. If it's anything else, if it's first missiles, second missiles, you don't do anything. So they don't actually, if you give a unit first missiles, for example, they don't cast their missiles yet. So this is just revealing orders and moving. So this phase only ends when all orders have been revealed and all units moved. So an important thing to keep in mind with this phase is that when you flip an order, if it permits movement and you want that unit to move, you have to do it when you flip the order. You can't go back later in the turn and decide you want to move it. So if you flip an order and say, for example, it's March and you decide you don't want to move the unit, you can't change your mind later on. Next is the combat phase. The combat phase is broken down into four waves. So the first is first missiles. The first missiles phase allows units that have been issued the first missile order to cast their missiles. So if I gave my archer units my first missiles, then they would draw back their bows and release the arrows now. If I gave my slingers first missiles, then they would release their slingshot now. Now, if units on first missiles, it's important to say they can't move. The only thing they're doing during a turn is casting their missiles. So that's it. Next is march. So units with march orders can now cast their missiles. And this also includes spells. So I usually say missiles, though it can be spells as well. So if you're playing a game of fantasy and you have a wizard, pretty much anytime I say cast missiles, you can basically also substitute that with casting a spell. The next wave is hand combat. So in hand combat, everything will simultaneous. So all units engaged in hand combat act this turn. And there is really no alternating going back and forth. So basically the players are going to say, okay, we're going to go to this little combat over here, and both players are going to make their attacks. The last part of combat is the second missiles phase. Now, second missiles is reserved for units that have the slowest firing weapons, and so that's why they go last. The last phase in a turn is the end turn phase, and this is really there for cleanup tasks. So if there's any orders tokens that are still left on the board, we take them off. If you're playing a game of fantasy and there's some spells running around out there that have a chance of continuing, then you check to see if they continue now. If any units have any break tokens, then you would roll to see if those get removed now. So the end turn is really like a cleanup phase. This is where we're taking care of just a few tasks that need to be taken care of. All right, well, that's it for reviewing the turn sequence and orders for Ages of Conflict. Thank you for watching. As always, you can join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Ages of Conflict, and there you can find the latest news on development, release dates. If you're interested in getting your hands on a pre-release copy, or just checking out some of the artwork that we're releasing on a regular basis, you can all find it all there. Thank you very much.